So this follows directly on from Tom's talk. I mean, I was going to explain classifiers, but he did a lot better job than I could do. He's an academic, I'm a former academic. So my name's Jonny Edwards, I'm from LifeQ. Jim Moore, the medical director, is also a practicing ENT surgeon and diagnoses head and neck cancer. And we've got together to form, oh, it's this keyboard. We've got together to form a company. His problem is 9 out of 10 of the referrals that he gets through don't need any further investigation. So he's wasting a tremendous amount of time. And it's wasting money, it's wasting time, and it really shouldn't happen. There are lots of causes of anxiety. You can imagine in those patients getting a potential cancer diagnosis. So it's a real problem. And we met through our daughters on a football field. And he said, what do you do? And I said, well, I do this data science. It's a big new thing, and I've been doing it for 25 years. And he said, well, is there any way of solving this problem? So that's really the remit of our business. Can we estimate whether a referral of head and neck cancer, can we estimate a referral of head and neck cancer using simple symptomatic data? So here's the steps. First challenge was getting data. We all know this. We were lucky, we've got friends at the Freeman Hospital in Newcastle, and so thanks to Vin Polleri, and he got us about 5,000 examples from about 2007 to 2010. So this is data collected, some in Birmingham, mostly in the Newcastle area. There's around 30 symptoms to each person in that data set. And these symptoms are things like hoarseness and lumps in throats and coughing and other things that are quite rare but nevertheless coded. And some of the data is time related. So some of it was you've got hoarseness and you've had it for three weeks or things like that. So it was actually only about 11 sort of features that you were extracting from a patient. And we had 397 cancer cases. So you can see this is called an imbalanced data set. We've only got 10% of our data is actually what we're really interested in. So you'll see that causes some issues. So next step, choose an appropriate technique to apply to this data. Now it's going to be a classifier, and Tom explained classifiers really well. You could see that one coming. And we use straight off the shelf. In fact, when I wrote this talk, I sort of realised how prosaic it all is. I just use off the shelf. It's a very, very well-respected package, scikit-learn. We used a slight addition in that we used some Bayesian techniques, but it's really, really straightforward. And we had the work done in about, the data we cleaned, and we had the work done in about, well, it was actually three weeks to do the whole thing, but about 3 days really of processing. It really is really straightforward. And initially we wanted to see whether we could remove people from the pathway, so we could directly say, you guys don't have cancer and we don't need to see you any further. We just don't need to see you any further. So our main remit, our initial remit was to do that. We subsequently thought it might be a good idea to say, you guys have definitely got cancer, we're going to see you really, really early. Or so on a probabilistic basis. So you say, you know, you've got a probability at 0.9, we're going to see you tomorrow. So that was the other idea, and we actually looked at some queuing technology, and we've got a piece that's another separate piece to this, which is can we put people in queues so that the flow of unwell patients is earlier than the flow of well patients. And this is all, I need to inform you, this is all on a cancer pathway. So does everybody know what a cancer pathway is? So you get kind of 14 days to see a patient, 31 days to diagnose, and 62 days to treat. So if you can prioritise, you can change the way that people are seen in that pathway. And trusts struggle to meet those deadlines in a lot of cases. Okay, so really, really simple. The message of my talk is, this is all prosaic, guys. You just get on, let's do it. Okay. So we built a classifier. This is my take on a classifier, and I'm going to read from the screen. Computer automated methods using prior patient data, that's the symptoms and the diagnosis, to assess whether a new patient has a specific diagnosis given a set of symptoms. So you've got some old stuff that links symptoms to diagnosis, and you actually say, I've got this new guy. How does that link? It's like a model. We're modelling that link. And really, that's all we're doing. And the latest technology, it's a real buzz at the moment, and the latest, people use the word AI. I don't know why they use that word, because it's not, it's just not. And this deep learning is the buzzword, which Neil knows a lot about. And deep learning is just MLPs, but another name. We use some really old technology. I don't know when logistic regression was, is it 60s maybe, not even 70s. You know, we used logistic regression, and we actually ran a raft of 9 algorithms, but logistic regression came out best, with some twists. So everybody follow so far. We've got some data, we've got these algorithms, we're just going to apply them. What I'm giving you now is the summary of the results, just taking some interesting results. So we've got, as people have talked about, we've got the 4 decisions that you can make. And we use that 10-fold cross-validation, so we know what's coming. We know what's coming for a lot of this. We use a test set. So we know that somebody should be diagnosed non-cancer or should be diagnosed cancer. So we've got this interesting, actually this, I don't know why I didn't see this before, but like yesterday I'm reading this and I'm thinking, well, I'm just diagnosed, this one I'm just diagnosing everybody with non-cancer. Because if you think about my data set, I've got 90% of my data is non-cancer, so I'm sort of biased towards that anyway. So really I'm just saying everybody, you know, that's 90 whatever % non-cancer. We used other methods, which is probably the only sort of, I know I'm doing myself down here, but it's the only sort of clever thing that we've done is to apply some slightly different methods. We use variational approaches and we change the probability. So a variational approach is a Bayesian approach that is more moderate about its estimates. Where the data is not present, it doesn't make us bold guesses. It makes more moderate guesses, and that worked for us. And you'll see this looks like a worse result, but is actually a better result because the non-cancer cancer rate has dropped significantly. And this is in line with clinical practice. So 1 in 1,000, well, it may be. I'm actually could ask that question. Is that in line with clinical practice? 1 in 1,000 false negatives. So every time, every person, for every 1,000 people I see, I'm going to see 1 person, and I'm going to tell them they haven't got cancer when they do have cancer. And it's actually quite interesting because we did systematic reviews on this, and it's actually quite interesting because nobody really, and should I say this? You know, Jim didn't really know his own false negative rate. You know, because it's temporal as well, you know, you make a decision and then they come back 3 months later. And so I got some ad hoc, off-the-cuff information from a nurse that said, oh, we had 3,000 people and 3 people were readmitted subsequently. And so I thought 1 in 1,000, but that's actually open to debate. Am I being more cautious? Should I be 1 in 500 and accept a slightly better rate? So the headline result is 26% of the referrals can be removed. This sounds terrible, but just they don't need to be seen. We can accurately say, don't come. And at a false negative rate of 1 in 1,000. This is class weighted. So what we did here was, we said, if you see a cancer case, really make something of it. It's important in the training process that these algorithms go through. So that allows you to kind of re-weight the population. So you're able to say, make a lot of this, and that works really well for us. So this is, so 8% is all the cancer patients, if you remember that sort of 10% figure. So does that make sense? And we use 10-fold cross-validation, as Tom talked about, and we estimate, and we obviously use a test set. So we get this headline. We did some visualization because it's, you know, pictures are great for explaining stories, and we used an old technique, another old technique. I'm a lover of old techniques called multidimensional scaling. And this is a plot that boils all your 30 dimensions down into 2. So these axes aren't actually notional. Don't forget about these numbers. And what we do is we maintain the distance between each individuals in this group. So what I've done is I've coded the cancer patients as black and the non-cancer patients as white. And you'll see that the diagram is dotted with, there's not a big group where you're drawing a straight line through the middle. There's not a big group of cancer patients and you can, like Tom did in his diagram, draw a big line through the middle and say, oh yeah, they're all cancer. So this gives us some indication that it's a complex diagnosis space. The data is probably not brilliant, probably not fantastically representative. So the axes are notional. And again, this is an hour job. Okay, is that one? Oh, that one. So what does this mean in terms of the Freeman that we dealt with the data with? What does this mean in terms of national, like locally and nationally? I'd actually never done this, but so it was great to write these slides. So we get a 14% diagnosis rate. The CCGs that feed the Freeman could turn back 25%, and we estimate that's about £75,000 saving for them. So that's they spend 100 quid every time somebody goes to see Jim. And so that's the 75,000 for one click of a button that took about 3 days to build. And a lot of time to collect the data. Actually, I should say the data collection is the most important bit. And 26% of the patients wouldn't have gone through the anxiety of having a suspected cancer diagnosis. So that's really, really important because we forget about that. So nationally, if we take and this is figures from the Cancer UK website, we could, with a 10% target, we could save 2.5 million. And if the new targets for the NHS, which are 3% diagnosis rate, we say 7.5 million. If you apply this to all cancers, you could save, and at the 3% diagnosis rate, you could save 225 million. Just off the bat with, like I say, a very, very conservative classifier. You know, a classifier that's really, really weighted against not making clinically bad decisions. So that's massive. And I think, you know, as people with data, we should all head for that because, you know, we all know the struggle that's going on with the NHS. So what's the impact? Well, what we could do is we could apply the technology we've got to other cancer sites. So like I said, if we could apply this across a spectrum of cancers. Now, I know the diagnosis domain is different. Some diagnosis domains are images. It's not necessarily symptomatic data derived from primary care. It's more complex. But we're interested in looking at that data because we can turn it around very quickly and the problems can be solved. You know, we can find out at least. And like I say, the collection is the important thing. We're especially interested in this vague symptoms agenda because it seems to be popular at the moment. So this idea that people come in with weight loss and a small amount of symptoms, and there used to be, Jim's told me about this, there used to be somebody called the general physician that would deal with those, but that's been removed. So there's this big problem with people who eventually get cancer but have had sort of vague-ish symptoms to start with. And we're interested in doing diagnosis work in there. We just can't find any data at the moment. The other interesting thing is if you take this, and Vin, the guy we worked with at the Freeman, if you take this data and you start rethinking about the cancer pathway, so again, if somebody is assured of a diagnosis of cancer, do they go and see one of the head consultants? If somebody is assured of not having cancer diagnosis, do they go and see a trainee or a nurse practitioner or, you know, a specialist nurse? When you're at 0.5, do you go and see the most experienced doctor because that's the most difficult decision to make? You know, so there's lots of things you can do with the cancer pathway. And actually there's this idea of learning pathways, so, you know, pathways that evolve with the nature of the sort of diagnosis space. And, you know, obviously this has implications for breaching because if you're managing the pathway more effectively, and we've got other technologies to do this, then, you know, it's a big problem. You know, people we talk to, they're at 60%. You know, they're not getting their patients through. So that's the impact we feel we could make if we were given a head of steam to do this. The problems, well, like I said, 5,000 examples, 400 cancer cases. It's not many. You know, I'm not into statistical power. I'm not really, I'm a sort of a bit old school statistician, but mainly machine learning. And, you know, I just have a feel it's not enough data. 400 cancer patients, it's just not long. And it's all from the Freeman in Newcastle, which has a demographic. So we really need, and we're actually in the process of trying to get a national study together so we can collect the 100,000 that happen nationally and make some data there. But what we're interested in as well is that data being current. So you'll have heard of things like Q risk and Q cancer. That data is quite old. We want head and neck cancer moves. There's this idea of HPV, which is a new virus in head and neck cancer. And the data is moving, so you've got to keep moving with it. So this idea that you collect data, you build an algorithm that makes inferences from that data, but you keep it rolling. And everybody gets access to that. Everybody gets access to that data. Why aren't we doing that? And we had a problem with head and neck not being fashionable. You know, there are fashionable, I know this is a terrible thing to say, but there are fashionable cancers like breast cancer that have, and they have more, you know, but the interesting thing is cervical cancer, which I always thought was a, you know, it has screening and whatever, the head and neck is 3 times as big. We had problems with where the work sits. So the data is collected at sort of primary care and the diagnosis is collected at secondary care. So what you've got is you've got that problem of like not linking the diagnosis to the data. And actually the systems aren't really in place to sort of carry that symptomatic data through. The only reason we got the data was because we had a very, very diligent nurse practitioner who would collect that data for us. And she's been doing that without remit for the number of years we stated. So we have a problem with where the work sits. We need the secondary care specialism, but actually primary care would have more advantage because they wouldn't then refer patients through and they'd make savings that way. So there's a little bit of sort of problems with the structure of the NHS in terms of delivering this particular project. And then the things we're sort of finding that trusts are busy. We all read the news. Trusts are not busy with head and neck cancer. They're busy with A&E departments and failing budgets. And we just struggle getting their headspace to maybe if we had something. That's why we're going national, because it's bigger numbers. So we're in a sort of slightly frustrating situation where we've got the technology, but we just need to apply it. So just that's me. I don't know. I'm doing all right. So just leave. This is my one message. Diagnosis data is gold. You know, it's if we can link symptomatic data to diagnosis in a sort of efficient way, and that data gets that data gets through information governance and sits somewhere nice that people like me can use. What's to say we can't solve some of the major problems associated with the NHS? So why are we not doing that? Okay, so thanks very much for listening. Questions? If you want more information, we're at the NCRI conference in November, and we're just tomorrow looking at a draft BMJ paper. We might get in there, doubt it, but we'll see. And that's it.